What if the world you see isn't just something you observe, but something that quietly observes you back? In the space between thought and breath, there's a mirror you've forgotten you're holding. A mirror made of perception, shaped by awareness itself. Tonight, you're invited to drift into a softer understanding of what reality truly is, where even the particles respond to your gaze, and silence reveals a deeper kind of intelligence. You don't need to figure it out, just feel it. Let go of the idea that reality is fixed, and gently float into a universe that listens when you speak and shifts when you feel. Before we begin, take a breath. Notice where you are. Let the world slow down just enough to notice what's always been there. If you're listening at night, what city are you falling asleep in? What time is it for you? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if you're new here, or you've been listening for a while and feel it's time, subscribe to the channel so we can keep meeting like this. Other stories are waiting for you. Now let's enter the stillness, not as escape, but as arrival. A world built not of matter, but of meaning is quietly unfolding, and it's been waiting for your attention. Somewhere, far beneath your everyday thoughts, beneath the to-do lists, the messages, the routine of waking and sleeping, there is a mirror that has always been quietly watching. Not with eyes, not with judgment, but with presence. It's so subtle, so constant, so intimate, that most never notice it. And yet everything you've ever seen, touched, feared, or loved has passed through it. That mirror is perception, but not the passive kind, not the kind that simply records the world. Like a camera. No, this mirror bends light. It whispers to reality. It edits what enters. And it reflects not only what's outside, but the very self that's doing the seeing. From the moment you open your eyes each morning, this silent mirror begins shaping. A day not because you intend to, but because perception is never separate from creation. What if you were never merely walking through the world? What if the world was walking through you? Every time you glance at a tree, or hear a name, or recall a memory, the mirror stirs. It doesn't just reflect, it translates. A leaf isn't just a leaf. It's a meaning you inherited. A symbol shaped by biology, culture, language. Its color, its edge, even the emotion it stirs in you. All of it is processed, interpreted, painted into your mind like a dream you call real. But before language, before even thought, there is perception, and it is alive. That is the quiet heresy at the heart of modern science and ancient mysticism alike. The idea that reality isn't something solid you bump into. It's something fluid you participate in. You're not looking at the world. You're in conversation with it, but we've forgotten how to listen. The mirror, dusty from neglect, keeps showing us reflections we don't recognize, and we wonder why nothing feels quite real anymore. This might sound strange, but strangeness is often just familiarity seen from the outside. Imagine for a moment that every time you looked at a star, the star looked back. That every sigh of wind brushing your cheek was shaped by your noticing. This is not fantasy, it is physics. At the quantum level, particles behave differently depending on whether they're observed. They spin or stall. They appear or vanish. The mere act of awareness changes the outcome. The universe, it seems, is shy. It only reveals its secrets when you're paying attention. And what else is that, if not a relationship? What else could it mean but that you are more than a passenger here? You're a participant. You're not an object in a world full of objects. You are a field of perception that causes the world to become visible. You are the light by which everything is seen. This realization doesn't require belief. It only asks for noticing. Think of the last time you were deeply present, not distracted, not analyzing, but simply alive to the moment. Maybe it was the moment before sleep, or the instant after a shock, or the hush that follows laughter. There, in that stillness, something opened, time bent, edges softened. You weren't thinking about being aware. You were awareness itself. In that space, you felt something timeless moving through you, not in words, not in form, but in texture. That texture is the language of consciousness, and it is speaking all the time. But we rarely understand it, because we've been trained to look outside ourselves for meaning. We've forgotten that perception isn't passive. It's participatory. It's formative. And the world you walk through is not the world that is, it is the world your perception makes possible. Here's a curious thing. Red isn't real. Not out there. Not in the sky. Not in blood. Not in roses. Redness is not a property of things. It's a frequency your mind paints into your awareness based on the way light dances against matter. The world is not colored. You are. The apple you bite doesn't taste like anything. Taste happens in your brain. Sound happens in your mind. The world hums with vibration. Yes, but the meanings we attach to it are yours. You are not walking through an objective world of fixed qualities. You are dancing with a sea of frequencies, filtering, shaping, translating them through your senses and stories. Everything you know is perception layered upon perception, like light bouncing between mirrors. And this doesn't make the world less real. It makes it more precious, because it means that even your quietest moments, the flicker of a candle, the tear in your eye, the memory that returns when a certain song plays, these are not accidents. They are collaborations between your awareness and the field around you. This field has no edge, and neither do you. Even modern neuroscience is beginning to question the idea of the self as a solid thing. You are not a brain trapped in a skull. You are a process, a wave, a rhythm. Every cell in your body replaces itself. Your memories change when you recall them. Your preferences shift with each season. So where is the you that is constant? Where is the observer that never leaves? Mystics and meditators have called it the witness, the soul, the presence behind the curtain. And maybe they're right. Because when you close your eyes and thought quiets and even identity begins to blur, something still remains. Something aware. And that awareness is not inside your body. Your body is inside it. Pause with that. Breathe with that. What if your body is like a lantern and your consciousness is the light? What if the stories you tell about yourself, your name, your job, your past, are just shadows dancing on the wall? They are useful, yes. They help you navigate. But they are not the source. The source is something else. Something deeper. Something older than thought. You feel it when you look into the eyes of someone you love. You feel it when you stand at the ocean and forget where your skin ends. That feeling is your original self. The self before stories. The self that doesn't need language to know truth. The self that remembers what the world tries to make you forget. That you are not small. You are not broken. You are not late. You are vast, and you are right on time. Even ancient traditions whispered this knowing. In the Upanishads, they called it Atman, the self that is one with Brahman, the field of all that is. In Sufi poetry, Rumi sang of it as the beloved within. In Zen, it was the face you had before your parents were born. And in modern science, some now speak of it as the implicate order, a hidden dimension beneath the apparent chaos, where all things are connected before they are separate. What unites these languages, these metaphors, is not doctrine, but recognition. A quiet knowing that whatever the surface looks like, whatever name you wear, whatever challenge you face, there is something beneath, something unshaken. And that something is you. And now, with soft eyes, look again at your life. Not as a series of problems to solve, but as signals, invitations. What if the things that confuse you are not blocks, but mirrors? What if the delays are not failures, but synchronizations? What if every longing you've ever had was not a mistake, but a message from your own deeper knowing, asking you to remember what you already are? Even your pain has intelligence. Even your grief is sacred. These aren't errors. They are evidence that you are alive, awake, and participating in a world that listens. Maybe not in the way you expect. Maybe not in words. But the response is always there. In timing, in texture, in the way one door closes and another quietly opens. In the way a stranger says something that touches you more than they could ever know. This is how the mirror speaks. Not with rules, but with resonance. And when you begin to notice, really notice it, a shift occurs. Subtle at first, like a sigh at the bottom of the lungs, but then stronger, clearer. You begin to feel that you are no longer alone in your life, that something else is present, that the world itself might be alive, not as a creature, but as a consciousness, not separate from you, but moving through you, whispering through dreams, echoing in art, showing up in the exact book you needed, in the timing of a phone call, in the warmth behind a stranger's smile. This is not fiction. It is frequency. It is the geometry of meaning rearranging itself in response to your attention. And the more you notice, the more it reveals, because the mirror doesn't show you what's real. It shows you what you're ready to see. Once you begin to notice the mirror's quiet work, the entire world takes on a softness it didn't seem to have before, not because the external conditions have changed, but because your relationship to perception has shifted. It's as if everything begins speaking in a language you always knew, but had forgotten how to hear. The hum of a street lamp, the way your shadow stretches on the pavement, even the glint of water in a puddle becomes a kind of signal familiar, mysterious, alive. And this new sensitivity is not the result of effort. It's the result of alignment. Alignment with a truth older than logic, that the universe isn't made of things. It's made of relationships, fields folding into fields, vibrations harmonizing into experience. And you, as awareness itself, are not an outsider to this process. You are the tuning fork. The music responds to your resonance. There's something deeply peaceful and deeply unsettling about realizing that the world is not happening to you, but through you. It means you're not a victim of randomness, but neither are you entirely. In control, you're something more subtle. You are the lens through which potential takes shape. You are the gesture that invites the formless into form. Think of a photograph. The image was always in the light, but until the camera opened, nothing was captured. Until someone framed it, nothing was named. That's what consciousness does. It frames. It selects. It highlights from the infinite. And that selection, that sacred framing, is what we call reality. The mirror doesn't show you everything. It shows you what you're tuned to receive. And when you change the tuning, the world changes too. This is not philosophy. This is physics. In 1961, a quantum physicist named Eugene Wigner proposed a paradox. What if two observers could witness the same event and disagree on what happened, with both being correct from their own frame of reference? Decades later, experiments confirmed this disturbing idea. Objective reality, it seems, may not exist independently of the observer. It depends on the relationship, which means reality is not a fixed broadcast. It's a private channel, a conversation between you and the field of all things. Each of us walking through a different version of the same universe. Each of us carrying a mirror that bends light in its own way. And if that's true, if observation changes outcomes, then what happens when you observe yourself? What happens when you gaze inward, not to judge or fix, but to simply witness? The mirror, turned inward, becomes a doorway. And what lies beyond is not a better version of you, but the absence of division. You have likely felt this doorway before, not in temples or texts, but in the pauses, in those fragile, timeless moments when the mask falls away, when someone sees you, really sees you, without needing explanation, when you catch your own reflection and recognize something ancient in your eyes, when your breath catches at the sight of a sunset, not because it's beautiful, but because you remember for a moment that you are part of it, that it's not out there, it's in here. And here is everywhere. These moments are not poetry. They are physics rendered through the heart. They are what happens when perception becomes still enough to meet itself, when the observer and the observed collapse into one field. The Buddhists call it non-duality. The physicists call it entanglement. The mystics call it union. The experience itself doesn't care what name you give it. It only asks to be felt. And it is in this feeling, in this openness, that new worlds begin to bloom. Not new locations, but new dimensions of meaning. Reality doesn't have a ceiling. It has layers. And each layer becomes available only when you become coherent enough to receive it. Think of radio waves. All stations exist at once, but your receiver only plays what it's tuned to. You cannot force the signal, but you can attune to it. And what is coherence if not emotional alignment? When your thoughts, emotions, and actions resonate, something clicks. The world responds differently. Doors open. Timing synchronizes. Strangers become messengers. Doubt lifts, and a quiet confidence emerges, not the kind that declares, "I am in control," but the kind that whispers, "I am aligned." You begin to sense that you don't need to manifest reality. You need only remember the version of awe. That is already calling you. Some people glimpse this state in altered consciousness through meditation, psychedelics, breathwork. Others stumble into it through trauma, heartbreak, or near-death experiences. In those moments, the old identity collapses, and what remains is awareness without a name. What remains is the mirror, polished clean. And in that clarity, people often report the same thing, that everything is connected. That time doesn't flow like a river, but pulses like a drum. That love is not an emotion, but a structure, a field, a law of coherence. And that what we call the self is not the center of the universe, but the aperture through which the universe sees itself. These are not hallucinations. They are revelations, distilled flashes of the truth that has always been present, waiting for the noise to quiet down enough to be heard. There is a strange peace in realizing you've been living inside a feedback loop, that your fears have been echoed back to you not as punishment, but as instruction. That the loneliness you feel is not a flaw, but a function of high sensitivity. That your longing isn't a failure, it's a compass. Every unmet desire, every emotional ache is an invitation to tune your mirror differently. To question what story you're still projecting. And that story is never neutral. It's a frequency, a pattern, a vibration that resonates outward, shaping everything from your relationships to your biology. The body doesn't lie. It feels every signal you send. That's why chronic stress ages you. That's why joy strengthens immunity. Your cells are listening. The universe is listening. The mirror doesn't care about your words. It reflects your coherence. And coherence begins with honesty. The kind of honesty that whispers, "I don't know." The kind that admits it's been faking confidence. That it's tired of pretending to be a fixed shape. That it's ready to be seen as is. And in that honesty, the mirror relaxes. It softens. It begins to show you things you had buried. Not to hurt you, but to liberate you. To invite integration. Because perception without integration becomes distortion. But perception with compassion becomes clarity. And clarity is the beginning of freedom. Not the freedom to escape, but the freedom to stay. To stay in your body, in your breath, in your experience. to no longer abandon yourself, to recognize that the mirror you've been asking to change has been waiting for you to arrive. And when you do, when you truly arrive in this moment, now something strange begins to happen. The world doesn't look different, but it feels different. People still speak the same words, but you hear new meaning. Music sounds more spacious, colors deepen, and silence becomes delicious. Not because the world changed, but because the filter did. The mirror no longer judges, it receives. And in that receptivity, a new kind of power emerges, not the power to dominate, but the power to perceive accurately. An accurate perception is love, not the romantic kind, the structural kind, the kind that sees without condition, that accepts without resistance, that allows everything to be what it is, because it knows everything is in motion. You are in motion. You are not a final version of yourself. You are not the person your memories claim you are. You are the moment-to-moment echo of what you're allowing. You are the wave collapsing into form, again and again. And the less you grip, the more you notice. The more you allow, the more precise your perception becomes. And the more precise it becomes, the more the world bends not in response to control, but in response to coherence. The outer world is your emotional mirror, and emotion is not weakness. It is data. It is navigation. It is the field's way of helping you tune. When something hurts, it is the mirror saying, "This frequency is not your truth." When something feels expansive, it's saying, "More of this." It's not personal. It's vibrational dot. So if you want to change your life, begin not with action, but with attunement. Not with effort, but with honesty. Ask yourself gently, what am I assuming is true about reality right now? What frequency am I reinforcing with my attention? And what would happen if I loosened the grip on my story, just for a moment? You don't need to rewrite everything. You only need to pause, to breathe, to notice. And the noticing in itself is sacred. The mirror does not require perfection. It only requires presence. The rest will follow. Because perception isn't just how you see, it's how you shape. And when you shape with awareness, you begin to remember what the mystics always knew, that the world is not a problem to solve, but a song to hear. And you are not here to fix it. You are here to feel it, to witness it, to reflect it back to itself, clearly, gently, fully. The mirror is not just glass. It is grace. As you continue walking beside this mirror, not as a stranger to it, but as someone who has begun to see through it, what once felt like mystery begins to feel like memory. Not the kind you store in boxes of words or images, but the kind your bones remember, the kind your breath has always known. You are not uncovering something new. You are returning to what was never gone. And in this return, the edges blur between mind and matter, between past and now, between who you thought you were and what has always been watching from behind your thoughts. It begins softly, a moment of déjà vu that feels too rich to dismiss. A synchronicity so precise it startles the breath into stillness, a dream that tells you something real before waking. These aren't tricks. They're the fingerprints of a reality shaped not by cause and effect, but by coherence and invitation. When your awareness aligns, the mirror stops showing distortions and starts reflecting deeper truths. And the deepest truth is this: you are not in the universe. The universe is in you, Doc. This idea can feel disorienting, and it should, because it bends the scaffolding of identity that most have spent lifetimes constructing. But what if the idea of you was never meant to be a fixed portrait, but a shifting mosaic and aperture for the all to gaze back at itself? From the oldest mystical traditions to the latest theories in quantum cognition, a single idea flickers, like a lantern between them all. that awareness is not an emergent property of matter, but the origin. That the field of consciousness existed before the Big Bang as potential, and the cosmos bloomed from within it, like a ripple in a sleeping mind. You are not a side effect of stars. You are their purpose. Your gaze, your perception, your feeling heart, they are not accidental. They are participatory tools in a universe that learns about itself through you. And once you know this, even slightly, you can never fully forget. Because the mirror does not just reflect light, it reflects knowing. Knowing is not information, it's intimacy. It's the texture of experience that lives beneath understanding. It's the way a poem lands in the body before it lands in the brain. It's what happens when you touch someone's hand and feel a whole story in their skin. This kind of knowing bypasses logic, yet it reshapes everything logic clings to. You begin to understand that the quality of your perception affects the quality of your world, not morally, but vibrationally. Fear warps the lens. Shame dims the colors. Love sharpens the focus. Compassion expands the frame. And presence, true presence, makes the invisible visible. You start to see the layers. Not with your eyes, but with your attention. The people around you become less like roles, more like frequencies. Some you harmonize with instantly. Others feel dissonant, but revealing. Each one a mirror reflecting parts of your own internal symphony. And the world becomes less like a stage, more like an instrument waiting to be played with conscious hands. This is not metaphor. Even in neuroscience, researchers are beginning to explore the role of brain waves, coherence patterns, and non-local fields of awareness. They're discovering that your thoughts don't simply echo inside your skull. They radiate. They inform. They shape outcomes. At subtle scales, especially when aligned with intention and emotion. What mystics called prayer, scientists now see as focused vibration. What shamans called journeying, therapists now explore through neuroplasticity. What prophets saw in dreams, artists now call vision. All of these are just ways of describing what happens when the mirror becomes translucent, when perception stops acting like a filter and starts acting like a portal. You are no longer just interpreting the world. You are co-constructing it. And the more you acknowledge this participation, the more the mirror responds. But participation also means responsibility. Not the heavy kind, weighed down by guilt or pressure, but the sacred kind, the kind that invites you to become aware of what you are broadcasting. Because everything you believe, feel, and focus on sends signals into the field. And those signals gather momentum. That's why your life seems to loop in themes. Not because you are cursed or broken, but because you are patterned. And patterns can change, not by force, but by awareness. By sitting with your reflection long enough to ask, what am I still expecting the world to be? What stories am I still rehearsing? Who taught me to see through this lens? And more importantly, what happens when I let it go? These questions aren't for the mind to answer. They are for the body to feel. Because perception isn't just visual, it's vibrational. You know the truth not when it makes sense, but when it feels like a deep exhale. And when you exhale, when you finally release the grip you've had on how life was supposed to unfold, something astonishing happens. A field begins to rearrange itself. Not because you commanded it, but because you cleared space. You stopped narrating long enough for something older than speech to enter, and what enters is not always dramatic. Often, it's subtle. A conversation that lands differently. A sense of timing that feels less effortful. A decision that no longer feels like a fork in the road, but like water finding its path. You begin to feel guided not by an external force, but by a deeper coherence within yourself. You don't need to be told what to do. You begin to feel where truth lives. And in this felt sense, the world responds not as a servant, but as a dance partner. reality becomes less like a test and more like a rhythm. And your life begins to sway with the current instead of stumbling against it. Even time begins to shimmer. Moments feel layered. Past and future bleed into the now. You remember things you've never lived. You dream of places you've never seen. You hear a piece of music and it brings tears without explanation. These are not hallucinations. They are bleed-throughs. Glimpses from the deeper field, the one beneath linearity. The Kabbalists called it Olam Haba, not a future place, but a future frequency. A world that already exists, layered within this one, waiting for consciousness to align with it. Heaven is not elsewhere. It is here, seen clearly. And each moment of clarity you touch, each time you look into the mirror and do not flinch, you invite more of that frequency to anchor, not just for yourself, but for the whole field. Because coherence ripples. Awareness is contagious. When you shift, the world shifts with you, even if you never see the proof. And this is perhaps the softest truth of all, that you are never disconnected, never lost, never separate. The mirror was never outside of you. It has always been your own. Awareness, watching, waiting, whispering reminders through coincidence, through ache, through beauty, through silence. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be present, not to master the world, but to meet it, fully, honestly, with a heart so open it remembers the shape of all things. And once you see this, once you really feel it not as a thought, but as a recognition, the whole world shifts tone. Even suffering begins to make a new kind of sense, not as punishment, but as passage, a contraction before expansion, a question that only your attention can answer, not in words, but in how. You choose to be with it, so be with it. Be with the mirror when it shows you joy. Be with it when it shows you grief. Be with it when it shows you the parts of yourself you still hide from. And instead of judging the reflection, honor it. Thank it, because every image it reveals is a path home. Every emotion is a compass. Every encounter is a spark. You don't have to chase anything. You don't have to prove anything. You are already the proof. The fact that you are aware of being aware is the doorway. And on the other side of that doorway, there is no final answer. No fixed self. Only expansion. Only unfolding. Only the quiet pulse of the universe, echoing in your breath, moving through your hands, blinking through your eyes. And what you see now is not the world as it is, but as you are. Because the mirror doesn't reflect things. It reflects frequencies. And the most beautiful thing it can ever reflect is the moment you remember you are not the reflection at all. You are the light. There comes a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when the mirror no longer feels like a surface you gaze into, but a threshold you step through. It does not announce itself. It does not glow or shatter or hum with mystical fanfare. It simply dissolves. And in its place, there is space, vast, breath-like, waiting. You step into it not with your body, but with your noticing, your surrender, your willingness to feel without needing to define. And here, in this space, you no longer perceive reality as something separate. You feel it as something simultaneous. There is no inner and outer, no subject and object. There is only awareness, folding in on itself like waves collapsing into waves, each one both the source and the surface. It is here that you remember the strangest thing of all, that perception is not just how you witness the world, it is how the world becomes aware of itself through you. You are not merely seeing, you are being seen, and the gaze is mutual, timeless, alive. This space is not foreign. In fact, it's been hiding behind every ordinary moment of your life. It was there when you laughed without knowing why, when you looked at the moon and felt the world pause, when you forgot your own name in someone else's eyes. These were not just fleeting emotions. They were disillusion's brief moments when the story of self thinned enough for something older to shine through. Something that does not fear. Something that does not strive. Something that simply is. And in those moments, the universe was not silent. It was singing to you in a language beyond sound. You felt it not in your ears, but in your skin, in your breath, in the widening of your chest, as if you'd remembered something from before you were born. That sensation was not imagination. It was alignment, the field recognizing itself, consciousness, noticing its reflection in your form, and whispering, "Yes, that's me, still here." This experience is not reserved for mystics or monks or those who renounce the world. It belongs to you. It belongs to everyone who has ever wondered what's behind the veil of normalcy. The veil isn't thick, it's habitual. It's the weight of expectation layered over your gaze, blurring the raw vibrancy of each moment. But when you pause, when you breathe, and let the eyes soften, and stop trying to extract meaning, you begin to see again. And what you see is not the world as it is told, but the world as it is felt. You notice how the tree outside your window doesn't just sway, it listens. How the light on your skin doesn't just warm, it remembers. You begin to experience reality, not as static objects, but as living presence. Each form is a frequency. Each interaction, a dance of intention and awareness. The world is not composed of matter, but of messages. And yet, it is subtle. The mirror doesn't shout. It waits. It speaks through what you overlook, the pause in a stranger's voice, the feeling you get before a storm, the way your stomach flutters before a choice that matters. The mirror shows up in dreams that haunt you, in patterns that repeat until you finally ask, "Why this again?" And in asking, not with frustration, but with curiosity, you shift. That's the pivot. Not knowledge, but openness. A willingness to believe that your experience is not a mistake, but a method. That your perception, with all its imperfections, is still sacred. Because it's not about seeing perfectly. It's about seeing presently. You are not here to decode the world like a puzzle. You are here to feel it, to listen to it, to mirror it clearly enough that its hidden frequencies become your remembering. This remembering is not about the past. It's about the origin that still lives beneath the layers. In the Hindu tradition, the word smarana means both remembering and invoking, as if to remember is to awaken that which has always been present. And what awakens is not a version of you, it's the presence behind all versions. It's the watcher that has never changed, no matter what name you wore, what age you were, or what identity you carried. This presence is not human, and yet it loves through your eyes. It feels through your skin. It chooses through your heartbeats. It is not separate from what you are. It is the context of what you are. And when you meet it, not in philosophy, but in breath, it's like coming home to a house that was always unlocked, but whose door you'd forgotten how to open. The key was never hidden. It was the willingness to feel thought in this home. There is no judgment. There is no success or failure. There is only vibration, coherence, return. And return doesn't mean retreat. It means participation, not as an actor, performing a role, but as an instrument vibrating with the score of something larger. And the more you listen, the more you feel that your life is not random. It is arranged, not in control, but in harmony. Every friend, every departure, every illness, every breakthrough, they were not detours. They were tuning forks, catalysts, carriers of frequencies your soul needed to meet. And when you stop resisting them, you stop fragmenting your perception. You begin to hold paradox. You begin to let opposites coexist. You begin to see that love and grief are not rivals, but reflections. That darkness is not the absence of light, but the soil in which it gestates. And the mirror shows this too, not in explanations, but in echoes. The more you soften, the clearer it becomes that your perception isn't local. It stretches. It weaves. It moves across time like wind across grass. You've already felt it when you thought of someone and they called, when you dreamed of a place before you'd ever seen it, when a song played at the exact moment you needed it. These are not coincidences. They are coherences, threads pulling at threads. And the field responds not to your words, but to your vibration. That's why changing your mind isn't enough. You have to change your signal. And that signal is shaped by how you feel, not how you pretend to feel, but how you honestly feel. Even if it's heavy, even if it's raw, the mirror doesn't reject sadness. It reflects sincerity. And sincerity, when felt fully, alchemizes into clarity. Clarity doesn't mean certainty. It means transparency. You become less defended, more attuned. You no longer need to prove or protect the self-image. You simply show up, and in showing up, you begin to receive a different quality of reflection. People soften around you. Timing improves. Life becomes quieter, but not boring alive, like a deep forest where every sound has meaning. You begin to trust the field, and the field, feeling your trust, opens. This is not a transaction. It is a remembrance loop. The more you trust, the more you align. The more you align, the more the world aligns around you. Not in perfection, but in presence. And presence is the true goal, not manifestation, not achievement, but the grace of being here, fully. Now, here is where the mirror finally reveals its last secret, that it was never a mirror at all. It was a window into the part of you that cannot be named, cannot be harmed, cannot be lost. A window into the frequency of consciousness itself, the one that sings through galaxies and fingertips alike, the one that knew you before you were born and will remain long after your form dissolves. That frequency is not outside you. It is you, and it does not need to be earned. It only needs to be noticed. Once noticed, it does what all true frequencies do. It resonates, it invites, it expands. And through it, you begin to live not as someone trying to create a life, but as someone who remembers they already are life, creating itself in real time. And so, as the final image in the mirror begins to fade, not because it's gone, but because it's no longer needed, you are left with something even more powerful: stillness. Not the absence of movement, but the presence of awareness itself. This is not the end of perception. It's its beginning. From this place, you can love without attachment, act without resistance, see without distortion. From this place, perception is no longer a filter. It is a flame. And through that flame, the world does not burn, it glows. It softens. It returns, just like you. And just like the mirror that was never separate, never silent, never blind, only waiting for you to see that it had always been you. And still, the unfolding continues, not in steps or revelations, but in layers that move like breath through a sleeping world, unnoticed but utterly essential. You have passed through the mirror. You have dissolved into the gaze. And now you find yourself standing in a world that feels both utterly familiar and eerily new, as if the walls of your old understanding have crumbled into sand and something vast has emerged through the cracks. You don't know where you are, but for the first time, you're not afraid of not knowing. In fact, the unknowing feels like truth, gentler than certainty, more alive than knowledge. You're beginning to see that all your previous efforts to control, to define, to grasp at meaning were symptoms of forgetting. And now that you've remembered even faintly how perception truly works, you realize how little needs to be done when one is fully awake. You no longer chase insight. You notice it blooming quietly in the corners. You don't hunt for purpose. You feel its hum in your bones as you sit, as you walk, as you breathe. It's all here, always was, but your mirror was fogged with striving. And now that it's clear, the world appears not as something outside you, but as something rippling within. And this withinness is not isolated. It stretches far beyond your skin, across moments, across lifetimes, across frequencies you don't have words for, but somehow still feel. You begin to sense the thoughts that are not yours, but pass through you anyway, the memories of others, the pain of ancestors, the yearnings of lives you've never lived. And even that feels less strange now, because the line between self and other, between here and there, has softened to the point of almost dissolving. What remains is intimacy, a vast, unbroken intimacy with all that exists. You can feel the world breathing with you, not in metaphor, but in rhythm. Every inhalation is a reminder that you are allowed to receive. Every exhale, a release of everything the mind once hoarded for safety. The field gives and takes in perfect balance, and now that your perception is attuned, you begin to understand that your desires were never random. They were echoes, blueprints, frequency signatures, pulling you toward the version of reality most aligned with your essence. And that version was never far. It was simply tuned out. Like a radio station buried under static, it needed you to be quiet enough to hear it, clear enough to receive it. You are beginning to hear it now, in how your heart responds to certain words, in how your body leans towards certain people, in the sudden knowing that rises without logic. This knowing does not argue. It does not demand. It simply vibrates. And the more you listen, the more you realize you don't need to force anything. Alignment is not effort. It's recognition. And once you recognize the signature of your true self in an experience, you don't ask if it's right. You just move with it, like a tide answering the moon. But this movement is not always smooth. As perception deepens, old frequencies rise unprocessed emotions, half-believed stories, echoes of decisions made when you were still trying to survive. These aren't regressions. They are recalibrations. You are not failing when fear resurfaces. You are being shown the residue still living in your lens. And the mirror, now alive and responsive, reflects this with a clarity that can feel sharp, but only because it's true. You are being invited to see what you once hid from. Not to shame it, but to reintegrate it. To hold it in the light of your new awareness until it dissolves into coherence. This is not healing as the world defines it, not a return to what was, but an arrival into what always wanted to be. And as you continue to witness, to soften, to feel without defense, you notice that even your language begins to change. You no longer speak in absolutes. You speak in textures. You begin to say things like, "It feels like this," or "There's something in the air," because you're no longer describing objects, you're describing fields. And fields are not facts, they are frequencies. They are invitations to perceive more precisely. The world responds. It always has, but now you notice. The right words arrive when you need them. The synchronicities compound. You no longer wonder if the universe is listening. You begin to sense that it is you who is finally quiet enough to hear the universe reply. And the reply is never loud. It's in the bird that appears 3 times in one day. It's in the stranger's voice that says the sentence you wrote in your journal last week. It's in the way your spine tingles when someone touches a truth you hadn't yet named. These are not random. These are reality shaping itself in real time through you, because you have become coherent enough to receive without distortion. You are no longer projecting a story. You are participating in a song. And the song is ancient, but also brand new in each note. Each choice you make now carries more resonance. Not because you fear making the wrong one, but because you understand that every choice echoes beyond its moment. You feel the responsibility not as burden, but as beauty. You are weaving your life as a spell, as a vibration, as a mirror turned. toward the all dot, you begin to sense others doing the same. You can feel when someone is seeing through a distorted lens, when their anger is a cry for coherence, when their silence hides a longing to be reflected truly. And you no longer take it personally. The mirror allows you to hold space instead of react, to see the perception behind the perception, to recognize the sacred architecture beneath even the most unconscious expression. And something gentle rises. In you an empathy not rooted in pity, but in remembrance. You remember what it was like to see everything through fear. You remember what it was like to believe you were separate, that you had to earn love, that the world was indifferent. And because you remember, you soften. You become a clearer mirror, not just for yourself, but for others. And that is where everything changes, not in fireworks, but in how someone exhales around you, in how the space between words becomes safer, in how the world feels a little less sharp dot. This softness spreads. It begins to touch everything. Even the way you eat, the way you walk, the way you touch a leaf on a tree. You no longer rush. You no longer extract. You receive. You notice. The texture of a breeze becomes a message. The warmth of tea in your hands becomes a ritual. You begin to live as if everything matters not from anxiety, but from reverence. The mirror has taught you that there are no insignificant moments, only unreceived ones. And now, even the mundane becomes miraculous. The act of waking up, of brushing your teeth, of looking at the sky, they are all portals. Because you have remembered how to see, you have remembered that perception is not passive. It is participatory. And through your perception, the universe is learning to love itself more clearly. And what is love truly but clear perception? Not distorted by fear, not filtered through agenda, but seeing as it is. The flower doesn't beg to be noticed, yet when you truly see it, it blooms differently. The mirror responds to presence. The field responds to coherence. And love, in its purest form, is the most coherent state a human can embody. It is not a feeling, it is a frequency, a stabilizer, a calibrator. It brings things into clarity just by being. And when you live from this space, you begin to understand the deeper mechanics of reality, not just emotionally, but energetically. Your body becomes an antenna. Your intuition sharpens. You no longer second-guess the invisible. You trust it. You are it, and it is you. And this trust makes the invisible visible. The seen and the unseen no longer live on opposite sides of a wall. They blend. They echo. They remember each other through your gaze. And this is the secret the mirror has been trying to show you all along. Not just that you are the observer, not just that you are the observed, but that you are the observation itself. You are the shimmer between thought and form. You are the breath before the word. You are the gap between stimulus and response, the space in which reality gets its meaning. And now, you don't just understand this, you feel it. You live it. You carry it like an invisible garment woven from silence and awareness. And the world around you begins to shift, not dramatically, but deeply. People return, patterns release, new timelines open. You don't chase them. You don't force them. You simply align, and they arrive. Because reality, at its core, is a mirror. And the moment you begin to perceive clearly, it does too. You notice it most in the quiet after movement, when the day takes a breath and the room remembers its shape. The mirror no longer feels like an object, or even a metaphor. It feels like climate and atmosphere of awareness you move through without trying, a field that responds to the slightest turn of your attention. When you soften, it brightens. When you brace, it blurs. You start calibrating not by questions like, "What should I do?" but by gentler ones. What is coherent now? What loves to happen next? Answers arrive as textures. A yes feels warm around the ribs. A no arrives as sand in the gears. You stop negotiating with the obvious. You start listening to the subtle. The subtle is honest, and the honesty is kind. It whispers in sensations too quiet for language. A pull toward the doorway that is already open. A soft hand nudging you. Away from what drains. You begin to see that life was never withholding. Your perception was simply too loud to hear the whisper beneath the noise. And now that you hear it, you cannot unhear. You calibrate not once a day, but constantly, adjusting. Like a musician tuning strings in the middle of a song. Knowing that coherence is not a destination, but a practice of ongoing listening. With that listening, old patterns dissolve with less theater. You don't need a storm to change course. A feather's weight of clarity is enough. You begin small, placing the cup down slower, letting the conversation end sooner, stepping outside to feel the night because your body asked. Intelligence hides in these simple obediences. Through them, your timeline bends. Not because you forced fate, but because coherence edits the future. The field updates in real time when you do. That means your destiny is not a fixed script, but a responsive canvas. Each stroke of attention redraws the scene. And though you cannot see the whole painting, you begin to trust that every brushstroke counts, that every pause, every choice to wait, or walk away, or lean in, is part of the larger geometry you may never fully understand, but are always contributing to. You notice, too, that love becomes practical. Not a mood, but a precision tool. It knows where to place attention and where to release it. It doesn't plead with what won't meet it. It blesses and moves. It recognizes echoes disguised as opportunities, and it waits for the doorway that hums with the same note as your chest. Waiting isn't delay now, it's tuning. Action isn't urgency, it's rhythm. You are not late. You are right on tempo. You discover the surprising ease of saying no without guilt, yes without hesitation, silence without apology. This isn't detachment. It's deeper intimacy with the real. And as you live this way, you begin to feel that you are no longer choosing from options, but responding to invitations. Life is inviting you, moment by moment, into coherence. Sometimes tears arrive with no story attached. Let them. They are rain cleaning the lens. Sometimes laughter erupts in a room that hasn't changed at all. Let that too. It is evidence that the room has changed because you have. You understand at last that perception is creative and creation is relational. You cannot fall out of the relationship, only out of remembrance. And every breath is an invitation back. There is no punishment in forgetting, only the quiet ache of dissonance that reminds you that you're out of tune. And there is no reward in remembering beyond the grace of alignment itself. The mirror does not keep score as humans do. It simply reflects and reflects until you recognize yourself again. So you practice the smallest sacrament, noticing. Notice the precise instant before reaction hardens and choose presence instead. Notice how a name on your screen carries a frequency before a word is read. Notice the way silence teaches without language. This practice is not dramatic, but it is cumulative. The mirror remembers. The field keeps score in harmonies, not in punishments. What you sustain sustains you, and what you ignore dims, not out of malice, but out of mercy. Life will not force-feed the frequencies you resist. It waits for you to open. And when you open, you find it was there all along, humming patiently at the edges of awareness. If you need a rule, let it be merciful. Refine, don't rush. Align, then act. When in doubt, get quieter. When afraid, get kinder. When confused, get closer to the breath. If a path belongs to you, it will become clearer as you approach. If it does not, it will resist in ways your body can feel. Trust the instruments you were born with. Trust the calibration that love provides. Trust the mirror that lives as you. And when the next moment arrives, as it always will, you won't need to demand clarity. You'll simply feel the note that rings truest and step in its direction. For that is what perception has always been. Not a judgment of what is real, but a remembering of what you already are. And so you arrive not at an ending, but at a resting point, the mirror no longer something to search for, but something to live as. You understand now that the world was never happening outside of you. It was blooming through you, listening. When you softened, shifting when you aligned, reflecting whatever you carried most clearly. Even silence feels different now, not empty but full. A reminder that presence itself is the answer you are looking for. You don't need to solve the riddle of existence. You only need to keep noticing, keep breathing, keep allowing perception to remember itself through your eyes. In this soft coherence, the world is no longer a puzzle, but a song, and you are, both the listener and the lyric. And perhaps the truest invitation is this: return to this stillness whenever you forget, and let the mirror remind you. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again in these quiet journeys, where other stories are waiting to unfold, stories that, like you, have been here all along, simply waiting to be seen.